A luxury sedan rolls to a stop outside Murphy's Auto Repair on a gray Detroit morning. The driver's door opens, and Emily Vargas steps onto the cracked pavement, her designer heels clicking against the oil-stained concrete. Under the hood of her car lies an engine worth more than most people see in a lifetime, but in 30 minutes, she'll be left completely speechless by what a struggling mechanic demands in return for fixing it. But let's back up to see how we got here. Joe Reynolds wipes grease from his hands with a rag that's seen better days, squinting at the invoice in front of him. $28.50. That's all that stands between him and getting his electricity shut off again. The garage around him tells the story of a man who's brilliant with engines but terrible with business, tools scattered everywhere, half-finished projects stacked in corners, and a growing pile of unpaid bills threatening to bury his dreams. "Joe, you got another customer," Frank Hill calls from the front office, his gravelly voice carrying years of cigarettes and disappointment. "Fancy one this time." Joe looks up from the ancient Chevy he's been nursing back to life and sees her through the smudged window. Emily Vargas doesn't belong in this part of Detroit, with her perfectly pressed business suit and confident stride. But what happened next shocked everyone in the garage. She pops the hood of her sedan, and Joe's breath catches. Nestled in the engine bay is something he's only seen in automotive magazines, a prototype hybrid engine that represents decades of research and millions in development costs. The kind of technology that could revolutionize the entire industry. "Can you fix it?" Emily asks, her voice carrying an urgency that doesn't match her composed exterior. Joe approaches slowly, running his calloused fingers along the engine's sleek surfaces. The other mechanics gather around, whispering among themselves. This isn't the kind of machine that ends up in Murphy's Auto Repair. This is the kind of engine that gets worked on in climate-controlled facilities by engineers wearing white coats. "What's wrong with her?" Joe asks, already lost in the complexity of the design. "She was running perfectly until this morning," Emily explains. "Started making this grinding noise, then just died. 3 other shops told me it's unfixable without shipping it back to the manufacturer." Little did Emily know that Joe Reynolds had been studying hybrid technology in his spare time for the past 5 years, teaching himself from technical manuals he bought secondhand and videos he watched on his cracked phone screen. While his colleagues saw just another rich customer with an expensive problem, Joe saw an opportunity to prove everything he'd been working toward. He leans deeper into the engine bay, his trained ear picking up subtle sounds the other mechanics missed. There's a rhythmic ticking that shouldn't be there, a vibration in the cooling system that suggests something far more serious than a simple mechanical failure. "Give me 10 minutes, Joe says, already reaching for his diagnostic tools. Emily checks her watch nervously. "I really need this fixed today. It's important." "More important than you know," Joe mutters under his breath, pulling out a specialized scanner he'd saved for months to buy. The display lights up with codes that would mean nothing to most mechanics, but to Joe, they tell a story. His eyes widen as the data streams across the screen. This isn't just a malfunction, it's a design flaw that could affect every engine of this type ever made. A flaw that he, a broke mechanic from Detroit, might be the first person to identify. "Frank, can you handle the Chevy?" Joe calls out, his voice filled with an excitement his boss hasn't heard in years. "I need to focus on this." Emily watches him work, studying his movements with growing interest. There's something different about this mechanic, something that sets him apart from the others who've looked at her engine and simply shrugged. Joe moves with the confidence of someone who understands not just what he's looking at, but why it matters. 20 minutes later, Joe straightens up with oil on his shirt and revelation in his eyes. The other mechanics have drifted back to their own projects, but Emily hasn't moved from her spot beside the car. "Well," she asks. Joe looks directly at her, and for the first time since she arrived, Emily sees something in his expression that makes her heart race. It's not the look of defeat she's grown accustomed to seeing. It's the look of someone who's just discovered something extraordinary. "I can fix it," he says quietly. "But first, you need to know what you're really dealing with here." This decision would change everything for both of them, but the real shock was still coming. Because what Joe was about to reveal would force Emily to question everything she thought she knew about this engine, about her mission, and about the unassuming mechanic standing before her covered in grease and determination. Emily leans forward, her composure finally cracking. "What do you mean, what I'm really dealing with?" Joe glances around the garage, making sure they're not being overheard, then fixes her with a stare that makes her stomach drop. Joe stares at Emily, his calloused hands still gripping the diagnostic tool. The tension in the garage is thick enough to cut with a wrench. Emily crosses her arms, her designer heels clicking impatiently against the oil-stained concrete floor. "Look, I don't know what kind of operation you think you're running here," Emily says, her voice sharp with skepticism, "but this engine is worth more than this entire neighborhood. I need someone who actually knows what they're doing, not someone playing guessing games in a rundown garage." Joe feels the familiar sting of being underestimated, but something about this woman's desperation keeps him from backing down. He wipes his hands on his coveralls and meets her gaze directly. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I've been working on engines since I was 12 years old. My grandfather taught me that every engine tells a story if you know how to listen." He gestures toward the sleek machinery under her hood. "And this one's screaming something nobody else has heard." Emily's eyebrows raise slightly. "Enlighten me then. What exactly is it screaming?" Joe moves closer to the engine, his eyes scanning the complex network of components. "This isn't just any high-performance engine. This is a hybrid propulsion system with microturbine integration. The cooling system uses a liquid nitrogen secondary loop, and the compression ratios are beyond anything I've seen in commercial applications." The skeptical expression on Emily's face begins to crack. She takes a step forward, studying Joe with new interest. "How could you possibly know that from a 5-minute diagnostic?" "Because whoever designed this beauty understood something most engineers miss. They built redundancy into the thermal management system, but they overlooked the harmonics between the microturbines and the primary cooling pump." Joe points to a seemingly insignificant component nestled deep in the engine bay. "That little guy right there is vibrating at exactly the wrong frequency, creating a cascade failure throughout the entire system." Emily's mouth opens slightly, then closes. For the first time since she walked into the garage, she looks genuinely surprised. But their moment is interrupted by the garage phone ringing incessantly and Frank's increasingly frustrated voice echoing from the office. "Joe! We got 3 customers waiting, and Mrs. Patterson's been here since 8 this morning." Joe glances around the garage. Old Mr. Henderson sits in the corner, nervously checking his watch. His rusted pickup truck sits on the lift, transmission fluid forming a small puddle beneath it. Mrs. Patterson paces by the coffee machine, her work uniform suggesting she needs her car fixed before her evening shift at the hospital. The pressure builds as Emily checks her own watch, a platinum piece that probably costs more than Joe makes in 6 months. She pulls out her phone and makes a quick call, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "This engine isn't just important," Emily says, ending her call abruptly. "It's critical. There are people depending on this technology working perfectly, and soon." Joe catches something in her voice, a vulnerability beneath the professional facade. "What kind of people?" Emily hesitates, glancing around the busy garage. Other customers are starting to look impatient, and Frank appears in the doorway, his face flushed with stress. "The kind of people who don't have the luxury of waiting," Emily says quietly. "This engine powers something that could change lives, maybe save them. But if I can't prove it works reliably by next week..." She doesn't finish the sentence, but Joe sees fear flicker across her features. Real fear, not the kind that comes from missing a business meeting, but the kind that comes from letting down people who are counting on you. Joe studies the engine again, his mind racing through possibilities. He's always been able to see solutions others miss, to find the one loose thread that unravels the whole problem. But this time feels different. This time, the stakes seem impossibly high. "I can fix this," Joe says, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "But I'm going to need you to trust me, and I'm going to need some time to work without interruptions." Emily looks around the bustling garage, then back at Joe. Something in his calm confidence seems to reach her, cutting through her desperation and doubt. How much time? Give me until closing. If I can't have it purring like a kitten by 6 o'clock, you can take it anywhere you want, no charge. Emily extends her hand. Deal. As they shake hands, Joe notices something else in the engine bay that makes his breath catch in his throat. Hidden beneath a protective cover, he spots a component that shouldn't exist in any conventional engine. His mind immediately begins connecting dots, forming a picture that explains Emily's urgency and her fear. Whatever this engine powers, it's not just important. It's revolutionary. Emily notices Joe's expression change, sees him staring at something deep in the engine compartment. What is it? What did you find? Joe looks up at her, his eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. The discovery changes everything he thought he knew about this job, about Emily, and about what's really at stake here. Just as Emily's expression shifted from skepticism to something approaching respect, the garage door chimed with another arrival. Joe looked up from the billion-dollar engine, his hands still grimy with precision work, to see Daisy Morgan stumbling through the entrance. The 73-year-old retired school teacher was clutching her purse with trembling fingers, her weathered face etched with worry. Joe, honey, I'm so sorry to bother you, but my car just died right outside the grocery store, Daisy called out, her voice carrying that familiar mixture of determination and vulnerability that had endeared her to half of Detroit. I've got my granddaughter's medicine in there, and she needs it tonight for her asthma. Emily's jaw tightened as she watched the interruption unfold. She stepped closer to Joe, her designer heels clicking against the concrete floor. Excuse me, but we're in the middle of something extremely important here. Joe felt the weight of two worlds colliding. On one side stood Emily with her billion-dollar engine and promises of recognition he'd dreamed about for years. On the other side was Daisy, who'd been bringing her ancient Honda to his shop for the past decade, always paying with exact change and homemade cookies. Ma'am, I understand your urgency, Daisy said to Emily, her teacher's instincts still sharp after all these years. But when a child can't breathe, that takes precedence over everything else. The tension in the garage was thick enough to cut with a wrench. Joe's coworkers had stopped their own projects to watch the standoff, sensing something significant was about to happen. Frank, the shop owner, emerged from his office with a concerned expression. Joe, what's the holdup over here? Frank asked, eyeing Emily's expensive clothes and then glancing at the complex engine setup. We've got 3 other customers waiting, and Mrs. Morgan looks like she's about to faint. Emily crossed her arms, her carefully controlled facade beginning to crack. I've already explained the critical nature of this repair. Every minute we delay could cost. Could cost what? Joe interrupted, surprising everyone including himself. Money? Because what Mrs. Morgan is talking about could cost a little girl her life. The garage fell silent except for the distant hum of air compressors and the tick of the wall clock. Joe looked at the intricate engine he'd been working on, then at Daisy's worried face, and felt something shift inside him. All his life, he'd been chasing recognition, respect, the chance to prove he was more than just another grease monkey from Detroit. But standing there, he realized that respect was something you earn through your choices, not your paycheck. Emily, I need 20 minutes, Joe said, wiping his hands on a clean rag. Mrs. Morgan, let's get your car looked at. Emily's eyes flashed with anger. 20 minutes? Do you have any idea what you're risking here? This isn't just about money, Joe. This engine represents years of development, millions in research. If it fails, then it fails, Joe said quietly, but his voice carried a strength that surprised even him. But I won't let a child suffer while I'm chasing my own dreams. As Joe walked toward the door with Daisy, he heard Emily mutter something under her breath about small-town mentality and missed opportunities. The words stung because they echoed every doubt he'd ever had about himself. But then something unexpected happened. Marcus, one of the younger mechanics, looked up from his workstation and nodded at Joe with genuine respect. That's the right call, man. Soon, other voices joined in. Mrs. Morgan taught my kids, called out another customer. She's good people. Within minutes, Joe had Daisy's car running again. The problem had been simpler than expected, a loose connection that took more patience than skill to fix. As he closed the hood, Daisy pressed a $20 bill into his palm. "I know it's not much, honey," she said, "but you've got my word that if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. I may be old, but I still know half the city, and they all owe me favors." Joe smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. But as he turned back toward the garage, he saw Emily pacing frantically near the engine, her phone pressed to her ear. Her face had gone pale, and when she caught his eye, there was something close to panic in her expression. "Yes, I understand the deadline," she was saying into the phone. "But you have to give me more time. The mechanic he's actually more capable than I expected." She ended the call and looked at Joe with an expression that mixed desperation with something he couldn't quite identify. "Joe, we need to talk. Right now. Because what I'm about to tell you changes everything about this engine, and we have less than 6 hours to make it work." The phone in Emily's hand trembles as she ends the call, her face drained of color. Joe watches from across the garage, wrench still in hand, sensing the shift in atmosphere like a storm rolling in over Lake Huron. "Who was that?" Joe asks, setting down his tools and wiping his hands on his coveralls. Emily's voice comes out barely above a whisper. "My boss. Marcus Chin from Chin Technologies." She looks up at Joe with eyes that now hold a desperation he hadn't seen before. "I need to tell you something, Joe. I'm not the owner of this car." The garage falls silent except for the distant hum of Detroit traffic. Even Frank, who's been pretending to organize inventory while eavesdropping, stops rustling through his parts catalog. "I'm the lead engineer for Chin Technologies," Emily continues, her professional facade cracking. "This engine, it's not just worth $1 billion. It's the prototype for a revolutionary clean energy system that could change everything. And if I don't get it working by tomorrow morning, Marcus is pulling the plug on 3 years of research." Joe feels his world tilt. "Tomorrow morning? Emily, you said we had time to." "I know what I said." Her voice breaks. "I was trying to buy time, hoping maybe someone like you could see what our entire engineering team missed." Frank Hill storms over, his weathered face red with frustration. "Reynolds, enough of this fantasy project. Mrs. Peterson's been calling all afternoon about her Buick, and we got 4 other jobs backing up. You're gonna run us into the ground chasing pipe dreams. Frank, just give me." "No." Frank's voice echoes off the garage walls. "I've watched you get distracted by shiny objects before. Remember the Johnson restoration that took 3 months because you got obsessed with perfection? We can't afford that kind of luxury." Joe feels the familiar weight of being misunderstood, of having his ambitions dismissed as impractical dreams. But something about Emily's revelation ignites a fire in his chest. This isn't just about fixing an engine anymore. "What if I told you this could put Riverside Garage on the map?" Joe says, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "What if working on this engine could bring us more business than we've seen in years?" Frank laughs bitterly. "And what if it bankrupts us first?" Emily steps between them, her earlier vulnerability replaced by fierce determination. "Joe, I need to show you something." She pulls out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. "These are the schematics for the hybrid propulsion system. Our team built it following traditional engineering principles, but there's something we're missing. Something that requires..." She pauses, studying Joe's face. "Something that requires intuition over algorithms." The tablet screen shows a maze of intricate designs that would make most mechanics run for the hills. But Joe's eyes light up as he traces the pathways with his finger. "You're trying to force the energy flow through conventional channels," he murmurs. "But this system, it's organic. It needs to breathe." "What do you mean?" Emily leans closer, hope creeping back into her voice. Before Joe can answer, the garage phone rings shrilly. Frank answers with an irritated grunt, but his expression quickly shifts to concern. "Yeah, she's here." "No, I don't think." "What do you mean competitors?" He hangs up and turns to Emily with worry etched across his features. That was someone asking about our special project. Wanted to know if we were working on some kind of advanced engine system. Emily's face goes pale. Marcus warned me about this. There are other companies trying to steal our research. If they know I'm here. The sound of engines rumbling outside makes everyone freeze. Through the grimy garage windows, Joe can see two black SUVs pulling up to the curb. Men in expensive suits step out, their movements too coordinated to be casual customers. Emily, Joe says quietly, his mind racing through possibilities. How much do you trust me? She looks at him for a long moment, seeing something in his eyes that makes her decision for her. More than I probably should. Joe grins, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, he looks completely confident. Then I'm going to propose something that's either going to save your project or destroy both our careers. He walks over to the engine, running his hands along its sleek surface like he's greeting an old friend. What if I told you I could fix this engine in a way that would make it impossible for anyone else to replicate? A modification so intuitive, so unconventional, that it would require both of us working together to ever understand it again? Emily stares at him, speechless, as the sound of car doors slamming shut echoes from the street outside. The garage falls silent as Joe takes a deep breath, his calloused hands steady despite the weight of the moment. Emily stands beside him, her engineer's mind racing through possibilities, while Frank watches from across the shop with skeptical eyes. Behind them, Daisy and a small crowd of neighborhood regulars have gathered, drawn by word that something extraordinary is happening at Reynolds Auto. All right, everyone, Joe announces, his voice carrying the quiet confidence that comes from years of solving impossible problems. This isn't just about fixing an engine anymore. This is about proving that innovation doesn't come from fancy labs or billion-dollar budgets. It comes from right here. He taps his chest, then gestures to the community around him. Emily's breath catches as Joe begins his work, his movements precise and purposeful. He calls out specific tasks to Daisy, who surprises everyone by revealing her background as a former aerospace technician. I may be retired, she says with a grin, but these old hands still remember how to calibrate precision instruments. Frank approaches slowly, his earlier resistance melting away as he watches Joe orchestrate the repair with the skill of a conductor leading a symphony. The billionaire engine's quantum processing unit requires a delicate recalibration that Joe has figured out through pure intuition and decades of understanding how machines breathe. Hand me that micro-torque wrench, Emily, Joe requests, never taking his eyes off the intricate mechanism. The one that's precisely 0.3 millimeters. Your corporate toolkit might be expensive, but sometimes you need the right tool in the right hands. Emily complies, mesmerized by Joe's ability to see solutions where others see impossibilities. As he makes the final adjustment, she realizes this moment represents everything she thought she'd lost when she left her small hometown for the corporate world, authentic human connection and the magic that happens when communities come together. The engine purrs to life with a sound unlike anything anyone has heard before. It's not just the mechanical precision that takes their breath away, but the harmonic resonance that seems to sing with possibility. Emily's eyes fill with tears as she stares at Joe, completely speechless for the first time in her high-powered career. But Joe isn't finished. He turns to face Emily directly, his expression serious yet kind. Now, about my payment, he says, causing everyone to lean forward in anticipation. Emily braces herself, expecting him to demand the substantial fee she'd promised, or perhaps even a percentage of the engine's revolutionary value. Instead, Joe's words leave her completely stunned. I want you to help me establish a technical training program right here in this neighborhood, Joe says firmly. Not charity, not handouts, but real opportunities for kids who dream of building the future but don't have the connections to get started. You've got the corporate knowledge, I've got the practical skills, and together we can create something that actually matters. The garage erupts in spontaneous applause as Emily struggles to process the profound simplicity of Joe's request. This man who just solved a billion-dollar problem is asking for something money can't buy, the chance to transform lives and build lasting change in his community. Frank steps forward, his voice thick with emotion. Joe, I owe you an apology. More than that, I owe you partnership. This garage, everything we've built here, it's as much yours as it is mine. What do you say we make it official? Emily finally finds her voice, though it trembles with newfound respect and purpose. Joe, I came here today thinking I needed someone to fix an engine. Instead, you've shown me how to fix something much more important, my understanding of what really matters. Yes, absolutely yes to the training program. And I want to do more than just help, I want to learn from you. As the sun sets over Detroit, casting golden light through the garage windows, Joe looks around at the faces surrounding him. Just hours ago, he felt invisible and undervalued. Now, he sees a future filled with possibilities he never dared imagine, not because of money or fame, but because he chose to use his gifts in service of something greater than himself. The billion-dollar engine continues its contented purr in the background, but it's no longer the most valuable thing in the room. That honor belongs to the connections forged, the community strengthened, and the dreams now within reach for countless young people who needed only someone to believe in their potential. Joe Reynolds, the mechanic who saw solutions where others saw problems, had just proven that the most shocking demand of all is sometimes the one that asks for nothing but the chance to give back. And in that moment, surrounded by friends old and new, he finally understood that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in the lives you touch and the legacies you leave behind.